Are you ready for SAP S/4HANA Beyond the Basics? Because we'll look at transactions and reports in S/4HANA, it's important to understand the fundamentals covered in my previous course, SAP ERP Essential Training. Generally understanding how SAP S/4HANA works will help you get the most from this course. Basic SAP navigation and reporting skills will ensure you know what's happening on the screen and ensure you get the most out of your time spent. The transactions and reports demonstrated in this course are done in the GUI of SAP S/4HANA 2020 on a Windows PC. This course has been created so you can watch the actions and clearly understand what's happening in the system. If you want to practice in your own system, I've written about how to get access at the link justin.training/SAP practice system. And don't worry about writing all this down. These shortcuts are documented in the exercise file called SAP S/4HANA Tips and Tricks that you can download. If you're taking this course, you're probably spending a lot of time in SAP, or you're planning to. We want to find a visual design that's going to help you do your best work. The good news is SAP's visual design is highly customizable, and the variety of themes can make SAP look like a completely different software. All right, let's customize our visual design. To do this, from the SAP Easy Access screen, we'll go to More, SAP GUI Settings and Actions, and Options. Currently, we're in the Belize theme. It's my favorite theme because it feels the least cluttered. But there are a number of available themes depending on your SAP version. When we click the dropdown, we can see 12 different theme options. Let's take a look at the SAP Signature theme. For our changes to take effect, we have to click Apply, OK, and then we need to log off and log back onto the system. We can see that our Launchpad already looks different. Let's log on. We can see that the SAP Signature theme is completely different. For example, our SAP toolbar has replaced all our words with icons. To get back to adjust our themes, we have to go to the Customize Local Layout icon and click Options. I know a lot of users love the SAP Signature theme and are very used to working in it. One of the reasons is we can also change the colors in this theme. To do this, we'll click Colors and System, and we'll change to SAP Gold. Our font can also be changed if you have a strong preference for a font that may be easier to read. The visual design in SAP is highly customizable. I encourage you to experiment and see which of these visual designs is most appealing and where you'll work best. We want your work in SAP to be as smooth as possible. Let's take a look at setting up some personal options to do just that. First, we'll look at showing our technical names. Technical names are another name for the transaction code. As an example, we'll drill down to create a purchase order under Logistics, Materials Management, Purchasing, Purchase Order, Create. In our menu tree, we see a lot of transactions, but there are no associated transaction codes. We're going to switch on a setting so we can see our transaction codes whenever we use the menu tree. To do this, we'll go to Extras, Settings, and we'll click the checkbox next to Display Technical Names. We'll drill down again. Logistics, Materials Management, Purchasing, Purchase Order, Create. Now when we drill down in our menu tree, our transaction codes are showing, and we can use those T codes directly in our command bar next time we need to create a purchase order. The next personal option we want to turn on are Tooltips. To show why Tooltips are important, we'll go to ME22N to change a purchase order. Our tooltips are helpful for icons we don't use all the time. For example, let's hover over the scales. The system doesn't give us any information. We can change that. To do this, we'll go to More, SAP GUI Settings and Actions, Options. Under Interaction Design, we'll expand our folder, and we'll click Notifications. In our tooltip area, we can see that no tooltip is selected. We'll click the drop-down and choose Medium. We'll also click the checkbox next to Show Tooltip on Focus Change. This ensures a tooltip is shown when you tab to a new icon. Now we'll click Apply and OK. Now we'll hover over our scales again. We can see that this icon is to check our purchase order. Lastly, there's one more personal option we want to change. We're going to turn on our keys within drop-down lists. This is useful if you're going to be dealing in certain transactions often. We're going to click the drop-down for order type. We can see our options here, but there are no keys associated with each of the options. We're going to turn those on now. To do this, we'll go to More, SAP GUI Settings and Actions, Options. Under the Interaction Design, we'll click Visualization 1. Now we want to activate the box next to Show Keys within drop-down lists. Again, we'll apply and click OK. Let's click our drop-down again. Now we can navigate straight to our selection by typing our key. For example, we'll type UD, and we see our cursor move to Stock Transport Order Deletion. Getting your technical names, tooltips, and keys within drop-down lists turned on are really helpful to navigate efficiently in transactions you use daily or the ones you only use occasionally. Security in our systems is as important as ever, but changing your password in SAP is not intuitive. There's two places to change your password in the SAP GUI. The first is before we log on from the SAP Logon pad. To change our password from this screen, we'll enter our client, our user, and our password. Instead of pressing Enter like we normally would, we'll now click New Password. This brings up our pop-up box where we need to enter our new password and repeat it. Once we would do that, we click the checkbox button. We're not going to change our password yet, so we'll X out, and we can see the system logged us in like normal. The second way to change your password after you log in is to go to System, User Profile, User Data. We can also navigate to this screen anytime using transaction code SU3. To change our password here, we'll click Password. Again, we need to enter our old password and then our new password and confirm it. Once we did that, we click our Change Password icon. It's important to note that the SAP password policy is set up individually by each company with a minimum and maximum amount of characters. There can also be rules about special characters and letter case. Because it's not something we do frequently, it's easy to forget where you can change your password in SAP. But remember, there are both options before you log in and after you're already in the system. Maintaining our personal address information in SAP is important, especially at large companies. It helps with the audit trail and it allows others in the organization to figure out how to contact you. Let's maintain our personal address information now. To do this, we'll go to System, User Profile, User Data. We can also navigate to the screen anytime using transaction code SU3. In our Address tab, we can edit personal details like name and language. The Work Center area has our role-based information, including our job function and the physical office location. Now we'll scroll down to the Communication area. We can see that the email address is grayed out, and most users will never have access to change it. This is done so the security and audit trails stay intact. and the email address will be updated by the SAP Security Administrator at your organization. Now, we'll add our mobile phone number. We'll enter 412-555-5444, and we'll click Save. We'll go back into that transaction using SU3. We can see the system has recorded this change by my user ID, which is student001, on today's date, 11/2/2022. We've now maintained our user profile address data so it's accurate and so we can be reachable to others in our organization. We want to make sure our user profile defaults are configured to make sure SAP is localized to the country we're doing business in. The defaults we'll set up include default language, decimal format, date format, time format, and time zone. To change these settings, we'll go to System, User Profile, User Data. We can also navigate to the screen anytime using transaction code SU3. Now we'll click the Defaults tab. We can see that our logon language is set to EN for English, but this could be updated if you wanted a different language. Next is our decimal notation. Our default format X is set to the standard here in the United States, but many European countries use the comma as the decimal separator. Our dates are set to the format that is commonly used here in the US. The option to use the day, month, year format, which is common in many countries, is also available. Next is our time format. We're currently set to a 24-hour clock, but we could use the 12-hour version with AM and PM from the drop-down list. We'll scroll down to the personal time zone area. This is where we set our personal time zone. We'll enter PST for Pacific Standard Time. We can see that our system is set to Central Standard Time. Large, multinational organizations that use SAP across many time zones will often set this to UTC, which is Coordinated Universal Time. This helps companies standardize their audits. We'll now save our changes. These user profile changes will stay like this every time we log onto this system with this user ID. Now we're prepared to transact and report in SAP the way that's most familiar to us. Let's look at maintaining user profile parameters. This is one of my favorite tricks in the system. This really comes in handy for folks that repeat the same transactions with the same organizational data over and over. We're going to look at how to have these fields auto-populated. For our example, we'll look at how useful this can be for those who create many sales orders. We'll hop into T-code VA01. We can see our organizational data fields are all empty. We'll typically want to add in this information each time we make a new order. For this video, we'll add a profile parameter for sales organization. But know that you can do this for any of the fields here in organizational data. So in our sales organization field, we'll right-click and click Help. This brings up our Performance Assistant. Now we'll click on the wrench icon, which brings us to technical information. We're setting up a parameter, so we want our parameter ID, which is VKO. Okay, we can close out of this, and we'll head back to our easy access screen. Now we'll go to System, User Profile, User Data. We can also navigate to this screen anytime using transaction code SU3. Now we'll click the Parameters tab. Now, in the Set/Get Parameter ID, we'll enter VKO. In the next column is our parameter value. This is what we want to show every time we see a sales organization. Here we'll enter 1710 and press Enter. Our system confirms that this parameter ID is for sales organization. We'll now save. Now we'll go back into our transaction VA01. Now, Our sales organization is defaulted to 1710. Our fields are editable. But if you're usually working with the same organization every day, this can be a big time saver. And this can be done for many other fields as well. Setting up the default printer in SAP in the User Profile Default screen is really helpful to get physical outputs from our system. This is one of the first things to do when working in a new SAP system. Setting up the default printer in SAP in the User Profile Default screen is really helpful to get physical outputs from our system. This is one of the first things to do when working in a new SAP system. To do this, we'll go to System, User Profile, User Data. We can navigate to the screen anytime using transaction code SU3. Now, we'll go into our Defaults tab. Our printer settings are under the spool control area. We'll go into the Output device and click the Match Code button to see available printers. We'll clear our fields and start search. At organizations with a lot of physical offices, this can be a huge list. In our test system, we only have 3 printers, so we'll select LP01. We also want to ensure our Print Now button is checked. If unselected, the system retains printing requests in the spool system until they are all released for printing at once. We also want to check our Delete After Output box. This indicates whether lists are to be deleted immediately after printing. Otherwise, what has been requested to be printed stays in the spool system until an expiration date. Now we can click Save. The system tells us that our printer settings have been updated, but it should be noted that we have to log off and log on for changes to take effect. Our default printer is now set, and we can print physical copies of transactions and reports that we need. We've dialed in your personal settings. Now we can move on to advanced navigation. In this next section, we'll focus on the more complex ways to navigate around the system. These are must-know tactics for you to maintain ease and agility when you use SAP. Everyone is familiar with navigating in the SAP GUI with a mouse. For users that want to get around the screens quickly, function keys can be a great alternative. Function keys are the keyboard shortcuts that can be used on any given screen. And every transaction has different SAP function keys available. Let's take a look. On the SAP Easy Access screen, we'll right-click. There's a big list of function keys here. The list we see has the function and the associated keyboard shortcut. For example, Help is F1, and to log off is Shift plus F3. Now let's take a look at function keys inside a transaction. We'll enter transaction code VA03. In our Display Sales Documents transaction, we'll right-click. We can see in this list the possible entries, which is F4. Instead of clicking our Match Code button, we could simply press F4 on our keyboard. And this brings up our search screen. All right, we'll close out, and we'll right-click again. Now we want to see a list of all our possible orders, so we'll press Shift plus F1. We can see that function keys even bring us into different transactions. Here it brought us into our list of sales orders transaction. My suggestion is if you find yourself in a transaction frequently, maybe you're creating purchase orders or sales orders every day. When you go into these transactions, start experimenting with a right-click. Note which keyboard shortcuts might be a time saver to what you're trying to do, and these SAP function keys will start to become second nature. Many screens in SAP can look similar. It can be hard to keep track of which transaction you're in, especially when you have multiple SAP sessions open. The System Information dropdown is a fantastic navigational aid. To open our system information, we'll click the arrow. Our system information is telling us which client we're in, which is S4M8-150. That's not really helpful. So we'll click it, and we'll choose Transaction. It says that it's SMEN, which is our session manager. Now we'll go into another transaction. We'll go into VA03. We can see that we've navigated to VA03. Now we'll open a second session. We'll enter /O for a new session, and then we'll enter MM03. Now we have two sessions open, but we can tell that we're in the MM03 display material transaction on this screen. The other time this system information dropdown can come in handy is when we're working in multiple clients, like testing in a production client, for example. We'll click the dropdown. We can see that this session is in client 150. If we had multiple clients open in the same transaction, the system information dropdown is a great way to differentiate to show which screen is in which system. The system information dropdown is a great reference point when we're working across multiple sessions in our SAP system. When I log into a new system, it's one of the very first settings I change, and I invite you to pause your video now and do the same. Copying and pasting can be quirky in the SAP GUI. I've worked with many SAP users frustrated by not being able to copy and paste easily in the system. The way to do it is not always consistent, but we're about to clear that up. First, let's look in a report. We'll enter transaction code VA05, and we'll execute this report. To copy and paste in a report, we can simply left-click and hover over the columns and rows that we want to highlight. Now we'll use a keyboard shortcut, Control and C. We can see that the data we copied has changed to a grid, indicating that it has been copied successfully. Now we'll open a WordPad, and to paste, we'll press Control and V. We can see that we've copied and pasted successfully from a report. Let's hop back in our system. Now we'll go into a regular transaction. We'll go into the Create Sales Order transaction. We'll put /N for new transaction and enter VA01. Let's say that we want to copy our sales organization information. We can't simply highlight and Control C. What we can do is press Control plus Y. We can see that our mouse cursor has changed. It's changed to a precision cursor. Now we're able to highlight and copy. We can press Control C again. We'll open our WordPad, and we'll use Control V to paste. In our normal transactions, we're usually going to need our precision cursor to copy and paste. Again, the shortcut for that is Control and Y. As a general rule, the copy and paste functionality is usually much more robust in our reports. Share this trick with your colleagues, and you'll be the hero of your department. If you're like me, you very rarely rely on the help functions in the software you use. But SAP actually has two really useful help functions. There are different help options for more general information or for help in specific fields. Let's look at both now. First, we'll look at help for general transactions. This is called SAP Help Portal. To get there, we'll click Help, SAP Help Portal. This opens our web browser to the Help Portal documentation on the SAP website. This is where we can get general instructions about the transactions we're working in. We'll type Creating a Sales Order, and then search. Now we need to select the product we're using. It's set to SAP ERP, but we'll select SAP S/4HANA. These steps will walk through how to create a sales order in our system. And this can be done for any transaction or report that you may be stuck on. Now let's go back to our system to look at more specific help. For an example, we'll enter transaction code VA01. And we'll continue to create a sales document. In this screen, we're creating a sales order, and we want to know what the billing block field means. To do that, we can click in the field and press F1. This brings up our Performance Assistant. It defines what the billing block in SD document is, Then it gives us the procedure and an example. The Performance Assistant is really helpful in unfamiliar transactions where we need to understand what a new field means. There are two useful help methods. The SAP Help Portal gives us general information where we have to search for the help we want. The SAP Performance Assistant offers us specific help when we click on a field and press F1 for specific information. The next time you get stuck in the system, it may be worth looking at the SAP Help Portal or the SAP Performance Assistant to guide you. When there's transactions you're going to use every day, it can be a time saver to create an SAP desktop shortcut so you can click straight to that transaction from your desktop. Maybe you're in charge of purchasing, and you want to create a desktop shortcut to create a purchase order. To do this, we'll navigate from our menu tree. We'll expand the Logistics folder, Materials Management, Purchasing, Purchase Order, Create. Now, the ME21N vendor supplying plant known is the transaction we want to create a new purchase order. We'll right-click that transaction and choose Create Shortcut on Desktop. SAP is asking for our permission to add this to our desktop. We'll click Allow. Our shortcut has been created. Now we'll log out. We'll log off, and we can now see our shortcut on our desktop. We'll double-click. Again, SAP is asking for our permission, and we'll allow. Now it brings up a login pop-up. Our username is entered for us, and we'll enter our password. And click Log On. We can now see that we're taken directly to our Create Purchase Order screen. Desktop shortcuts are very handy when you're always using the same transactions regularly and want to open them straight from your desktop. Take a minute now to pause your video and add your most used transaction as a shortcut on your desktop. Now we're going to set an SAP Start Transaction. This is a great trick for business users that start most days in the system at the same transaction. This removes an extra step by opening the system in a transaction instead of at the SAP Easy Access screen. Let's say that we create sales orders almost every day first thing. We do it via T-code VA01. We'll set this as our start transaction. To do this, we'll go to Extras, Set Start Transaction. We'll enter transaction code VA01 and press Continue. Now we'll log off. And we'll log back on. We're brought directly into the Create Sales Document transaction. We can confirm this by looking at the System Information area, and it shows that yes, we're in VA01. The less clicks and keystrokes, the better. SAP Start Transactions are great when you're always starting in the same transaction. They save your valuable time and let you get right to business. What do you do if you don't know a transaction code? What if there's a transaction you haven't used in a long time and you can't remember the T code? There's two ways to find a T code within SAP. Let's say we want to view a goods movement, but we forget the transaction code. The first way is to use the Find button from our SAP Easy Access screen. Before we do that, we want to ensure our technical names are displayed. Technical names are how SAP refers to transaction codes. We'll click Extras, Settings, and check the box next to the Display Technical Names. Now we'll use the Find button in our menu tree. We'll click Find, and we'll type in Goods Movement. I don't love this search function, as what you type has to be an exact match as it's written in the system. In this type of search, we do want to search in the technical names and in texts, which is the description of the transaction. Now we'll click Find. That brings us to the Goods Movement folder. we'll click Find Next. And that brings us to the transaction we want, MIGO, for goods movement. The second way to search is by using a transaction code called search_SAP_menu. Let's try it now. In our Enter Search text field, we'll enter goods movement. And click Continue. This brings up many results, but we can see that our transaction code we want here is MIGO. We'll type /n for new transaction, MIGO, and press Enter. That brings us to our goods movement initial screen. Sometimes we need a little help finding the transaction we need to execute or the report we need to run. These two tactics will help us find them. To use SAP effectively, we have to find the data we want to work with. Whether it's a business partner number or a material number, it's impossible to have all this data memorized. Wildcards allow a search when we only have partial information. Let's search for a business partner. We'll enter transaction code BP. This brings us to our Maintain Business Partner transaction. In our search, we're going to find a business partner and we're going to search by name. We know that we're needing to find a business partner that has Minnesota in the name, so we'll type Minnesota in our Name 1 field. And we'll click Start. Our system says that no business partners found. The reason for this is SAP is searching for an exact match. This is where our wildcards come into play. This time in our Name 1 field, we'll type asterisk, which is our wildcard, Minnesota, and asterisk again. What this means to the system is that there can be anything in this business partner's name before Minnesota, and there can be any characters after Minnesota. We'll click Start. We see that this business partner's name is Minnesota Retailers, and their business partner number is 44. We can use wildcards in any searchable fields in SAP. SAP Search analyzes tables looking for an exact match. These wildcards are a lifesaver when we're not exactly sure what something is called. When your searches aren't returning results, remember to add asterisks. Many transactions can be repetitive. We end up selecting the same options over and over. Creating personal lists in fields can simplify our day-to-day work. Let's create a personal list now. We'll do it in the Create Sales Document transaction by using transaction code VA01. Assume that there are only two types of orders we create on a regular basis. We want to create a personal list in our order type field. We'll click the Match Code button to see our possible options. We have 132 regular entries, but we only use 2 of them. We're now going to create a personal list. The first order type we want to add is OR1 for a standard order. We'll click the Find, OR1, Find. Now that we have this option highlighted, we'll click Insert in Personal List. Now we'll find our other order type. We'll click Find and RE. Now we'll insert our RE returns into our personal list. Now we'll close. The next time we come into this transaction, we'll click the Match Code button again, and we can see that our personal list is opened with only 2 options, OR1 for a standard order and RE for returns. It's also possible to delete from our personal list. All we need to do is click our order type and then choose Delete from Personal List. If we do need to see all our order types, we can click the globe icon, which is Display All Values. These personal lists make our lives easier when dealing in fields with many options that we don't often use. They help us narrow our options and make our lists more manageable. and our global list of possible entries is always available for those rare cases. Take a minute now to pause this video and create a personal list in a transaction that you use at least once a week. The command field in SAP is where we enter our transaction codes. For regular users of SAP, the command field gets a lot of attention. We're going to look at typical command field shortcuts, and then some of the more advanced ones. Let's start with the common ones. To do so, we'll enter MM03. We're going to display a material. We'll click Select Views. Choose Basic Data 1 and continue. We can see that our cursor is currently in the Material field in transaction code MM03. To get our cursor back in the command field, we're going to press Control and the /. Now, to go to a new transaction in our current session, we first have to enter /n. /n is for a new transaction in our current session. We'll type /n VA01. Enter. We can see that we're now in a new transaction, VA01. Now we want to open new sessions. Again, we'll go back to the command field using Control /, and we'll open a new transaction within a new session. To do this, we'll press /O for open and BP for the business partner transaction. We can see our maintain business partner transaction has been opened successfully. And we can also see down below that both of our sessions are now open, Create Sales Documents and Maintain Business Partner. To get to the session overview screen, we can type /O without a transaction code. We see we currently have 2 sessions open. In SAP, we're allowed to have up to 6 sessions open at one time. We can also delete a session by clicking on it from this screen and clicking Delete Session. When we go below, we now see that our Create Sales Order screen has now been deleted. We can also open a brand new session using /O. We'll type /O and choose Create. That brings us to an SAP Easy Access screen in a new session. The next, more advanced shortcut we're going to use is the **, then the T code. That's going to help us skip the initial screen in whatever transaction we're going into. As an example, we'll do /*MM02. Enter. We can see in this transaction, we've skipped all the way over Material and gone straight to the second screen, which is Select Views. We'll close this screen. The next shortcut we'll look at is /n end. This brings up the log off confirmation screen. We don't want to log off yet, so we'll click No. We have one more shortcut to go over, but use this one with caution. This will log us off the system without a warning message. It's really useful on a Friday afternoon, and you want to get off your system as quickly as possible, but it will not save your work. Let's try it now. In the command bar, we'll type /n EX and press Enter. Now you can impress your colleagues with these command field shortcuts, but please take caution and make sure your work is saved when you're using them. Most of the time, SAP transactions are used out of the box. Companies map their business processes to standard SAP transactions. But sometimes a business has special requirements. When that happens, custom transactions are developed, and their associated transaction codes will always start with a Y or a Z. In large organizations, sometimes it's difficult to figure out what custom transactions have been developed. To find out, we can use transaction code SE16, which is the data browser transaction. This transaction is used to look up information in tables. We'll enter it now. Depending on your organization and your authorization, this T code may be locked down. In this transaction, we want to look up table TSTC. This table is a record of all the transaction codes in the system. We'll press Table Contents. In the T-code field, we'll click the Multiple Selection button. Again, custom transactions always start with a Y or a Z. So we'll type Y asterisk and Z asterisk. This is telling the system we want to return all transaction codes that start with Y or start with Z and have anything after them. We'll click to copy our selection criteria and click Execute. We see that we have 72 custom transaction codes in this test system. The first column is the actual custom transaction code. As we can see on this list, they either start with a Y or with a Z. The last column has a description about what each of these custom transactions do. As we're in a practice system, these custom transactions don't have a lot of info. In a previous video, we talked about using the SAP Help portal. Because these transactions are custom, SAP would not have specific documentation on how to use each of these custom transaction codes. This is a really handy way of seeing exactly which custom SAP transactions your organization has implemented. We have all of our personal settings and advanced navigation covered, so now we're ready to jump into reporting. Defining our selection criteria and running reports is where the magic all starts to happen. This part is fun because we get amazing insights into all the data in our system. In this section, we'll cover search variants and running reports in the background. But first, we'll start with using the multiple selection tool. SAP reporting is only as helpful as the data we enter. So let's dive in. This data which drives our report results is called selection criteria, and it's how we narrow down our reporting results. To experiment with the multiple selection tool, we'll go to VA05. This brings us to our list of sales orders report. We're not going to enter any selection criteria and just execute our report as is. With no selection criteria entered, we can see that our report has 26 sales documents. Now we'll click Back. Now we want to enter two sold to parties. Right now, when we hover over our multiple selection tool, we can see that it's blank. We'll click into our multiple selection button. We're now going to add two different sold to parties. The first is 171-00002. The next is 171-00004. This is telling the system to return all the sales documents from these two sold to parties. We'll click Copy to copy this criteria. Now we can see that the multiple selection button has changed, and when we hover over it, it says Multiple Selection Active. Now we'll execute our report. We can now see that our sales order report document has narrowed down to 17 entries. Now we'll click Back. Now we'll enter a document date range, which will only show our sales orders between two specific dates. We'll enter 10/1/2022 and 12/31/2022. And we'll execute. We can now see that our report only returned 7 sales orders. Now we'll click Back. Now in the multiple selection button, we want to exclude materials. To do this, we'll click our multiple selection next to material. We want to exclude sales orders that have materials FGME01 and material RM15. We'll copy this criteria over and again execute this report. We can now see that this report only returned 2 sales orders based on all our selection criteria. We'll go back one more time. and we'll click our multiple selection button next to Document. We'll click Exclude Ranges. Similar to excluding single values, we can also exclude ranges. This is especially useful for document numbers that are assigned in order or date ranges that we want to exclude. Our multiple selection tool allows us to select multiple single values, specify ranges, exclude single values, and exclude ranges. Reporting in SAP is powerful when we can be as specific with our selection criteria as possible, and the multiple selection tool is a key piece to achieve just that. Sometimes we run reports with the same selection criteria over and over again. A handy time-saving tool for running these repetitive reports is called a search variant. We'll create one now. To do this, we'll go to VA05, our list of sales orders report. In our scenario, we'll assume that we're running the same report on a weekly basis to see how many orders come from one customer for a specific material. So in our sold to party, we'll enter that customer number, 171-00001. In the material field, we'll enter FG111_A for the name of our material. We'll scroll down to our organizational data. Our sales organization is already populated, so we'll enter our distribution channel. We'll enter 10, and our division, 00. Now we want to run this exact report every week, so we'll save this criteria as a variant. To do this, we'll click Save as Variant. We'll name this variant. We'll call it AO Orders. And in the description, we'll call it A1 Retail, FG Orders. Our Protect Variant box is unchecked. If this was checked, it would mean the variant could only be changed by the person who created it or last changed it. We'll now save our variant. We can see that our variant, AO Orders, has been successfully saved. Okay, we'll exit out of this transaction. We'll go back in using transaction code VA05. Now, to call our variant, we'll click Get Variant. We'll choose AO Orders. Note editor, could we please have an FPI on sold to party and material that are both populated? We can see that our sold to party and material are both populated with what we entered. We'll scroll down. We can also see our sales organization, distribution channel, and division are also populated with the information from our variant. Now we'll execute our report. We can see that when we execute our report, the sold to party and material are exactly for the criteria we entered in our variant. Search variants can be big time savers for reports we run frequently with the same selection criteria. Is there a report that you run daily, weekly, or every month? If so, pause this video and go create a search variant now. Search variants are really handy for running reports when we have repetitive selection criteria. But what happens when we no longer need a search variant? Let's look at how to delete a search variant. To do so, we'll go into transaction code VA05. In our last video, we created a variant for sales orders by a specific customer for a specific material. Let's assume that they've gone out of business and we want to delete our search variant. At the top, we'll click Go To, Variants, Delete. This brings up our Delete Variants pop-up. We'll select the AO Orders variant that we created and click Choose. This brings up our pop-up whether we want to delete this variant in all clients or in the current client only. We'll select In All Clients and choose Continue. We'll confirm one more time that yes, we do want to delete this variant. And we have a success that our variant has been successfully deleted. Now when we click Go To, Variants, we see that our delete is grayed out. We have no more variants to delete. When our business needs change and we no longer need a search variant, we can delete them and keep our variant lists free of clutter. Now let's talk about running reports in the background. When and why would we want to do this? First, running in the background doesn't disrupt your session, and you can continue to work. Big reports can take many minutes and can disrupt your workflow. The solution is to run a report in the background. Let's try it now. We'll enter transaction code VA05. This brings us to our list of sales orders report. Normally, we would enter our selection criteria and press execute. Because we want to execute in the background, we'll click Program, Execute in Background. This brings up our background print parameters pop-up screen. We want an electronic copy, so we'll print to PDF. In our print time field, we could set this report to run for a later date. We want it to run immediately, so we'll leave this as is. Now we'll click Continue. This brings up our start time screen. Again, we could reset the start time for this report to run. We'll click Immediate and choose Save. We get a success message from our system that our background job was scheduled to run. That means this report is running in the background. We can continue to work and come back to it when we're ready. Now to get the results of our report, we'll go into transaction code SP01. Because we're already in a transaction, we'll type /n SP01. Our request was made by my login, which is student 001, and it was done today. We'll now execute. This screen is assuming we are wanting to print. Before we do, we can display the contents of the report by clicking the spool number and then clicking Display Contents. This brings up the results of the report we ran in the background. Running reports in the background is really useful when we're running a bunch of reports and they have a lot of data. It doesn't interrupt our work, but it gets us the information we need when we need it. We'll now go back. When we're finished with the spool request, we can delete it from the queue. To do this, we click the checkbox and choose Delete. We'll confirm we do want to delete, and our spool is empty. This was a fairly small report because we're working in a practice system. Sometimes we need to run reports with thousands of lines. That's when we want to run a report in the background and get our results when we're ready. We've made it to the section on report results. Here we're going to go over the many ways we can sort, filter, total, change our layout, and share reports. First, we're going to start with sorting. Sometimes we need to manipulate our report results to make our data more meaningful. The sort function is a great way to move numerical or date fields to see data in order from oldest, biggest, smallest, or newest. Let's go sort a report in our system. First, we need some data to sort. We'll enter transaction code VA05. This takes us to our list of sales orders report. We're going to execute this without any limitations. To make our report a little easier to read, we'll go to Settings, Columns, Optimize Width. We can see our report has returned 26 entries. In our first scenario, we want to sort by the order with the largest net value. To do this, we'll sort by the column NV header. This is net value header. This column is the net value of the entire order after any discounts and surcharges are taken into account. Sales taxes are not included. To do this, we'll right-click and choose Sort in descending order. The system puts a little red arrow pointing down, which denotes that we've got an active sort and that this sort is descending because it's pointing down. We can see that our largest order is for $200,000. In the next scenario, we want to see the oldest order in our system. To do this, we'll go to our Document Date column. We'll click in the column and choose the icon that says Sort in Ascending. The oldest order in our system comes from March 2nd, 2022. We can also sort by multiple fields at once. To do this, we'll click Change Layout. In our Change Layout pop-up, we'll click the Sort Order tab. We'll remove our document date. We'll choose Net Value Item and bring it over to our Sort Criteria side. We want to make this sort in descending order, so we'll click this radio button. We also want to sort by order quantity. We'll click Order Quantity Item and bring it over to our Sort Criteria. We also want to sort descending here. Our system is going to read these instructions in order. It's going to sort first by descending net value, then by order quantity. So if two net values are equal, then it will sort by order quantity, with the larger order quantity coming first. Now we'll choose Adopt. Now we can see our results. We can see that Order 22 and Order 15 both have a net value of 300. But the system displays Order 22 first because the order quantity of 30 is greater than 12. And we set the quantity to sort descending. Sorting is a powerful way to manipulate reports that have quantitative data. And we want to see that data that is oldest, biggest, smallest, or newest. Filtering is a very useful tool to narrow report results when the report has been run too broadly. It allows us to drill down and see more narrow results that we define. Again, we need some data. We'll enter transaction code VA05. This is our list of sales orders report. We're going to execute this without any selection criteria. To make our report easier to read, we'll go to Settings, Columns, Optimize With. We see our report has returned 26 entries. Now we're ready to filter. We'll click the Set Filter button. We can filter this report from as many columns as we like. Filtering is a two-step process. First, we have to decide what we want to filter by. Let's say we want to see all sales orders to a specific sold to party or customer that are for up to $1,000 US. First, we need to define our filter criteria. So in our column set, we'll choose Sold to Party and add it to the filter criteria side. Next, we'll scroll down and choose Net Value Header and also add it to the filter criteria side. That's step 1. Now step 2 is to define our values. We'll click Define Values. The sold to party we want to filter by is 171,000,001. The document currency field, which is set to US dollars, comes over with our net value field. In our net value field, we'll click the multiple selection button to define a range. We'll choose Select Ranges. In our lower limit, we'll enter $0. And our upper limit, we'll enter $1,000. We'll choose Copy. And now we're ready to execute. We can see that our filter has narrowed our entries down to 4 sales orders. We can see a little filter icon in our Sold to Party column. And the only sales orders are to the Sold to Party that we defined, A1 Retail. And in our net value column, we can see that all these sales orders are between 0 and $1,000 US. If we wanted to keep these filters, but adjust them somehow, we could again click the Set Filter button. With an active filter, we get a new icon. When we hover over it, it's the Delete filter. We'll click it. Our filters have been removed, and our report results includes all 26 sales orders. Filtering is similar to narrowing your report search criteria, but in this case, it's done after we've already run the report. Filtering is a useful tool to drill down within our data sets to get the exact insights we need. Totaling columns and reports helps us understand our data from an aggregate standpoint. It can help us understand the performance of whole areas of the business instead of just on a line-by-line basis. Let's look at how well our sales department has done in 2022. To do this, we'll enter transaction code VA05 to go to our list of sales orders report. In our order type field, we'll enter OR1 for standard orders. And for our document date, we'll enter the first of the year and the end of 2022. And we'll execute. We'll go to Settings, Columns, and Optimize With. Our NV header column is the net value of each sales order. This is the column we want to total. We'll click in the column, and we'll click the sigma icon, which is total. We can see that our net value column has been totaled, and we have a net value at the bottom of $209,677.30. Now we want to see which product we sold the most in 2022. To do this, we'll click in the Material column, and we'll click the subtotal icon. Now we can see our subtotals broken down by each material. For example, our material called FG111_A had $202,251 in sales this year. The next largest material by sales value in 2022 was FGME01 with $6,046.65. Totaling and subtotaling can lead to great insights when looking at data from a comprehensive viewpoint. It can help our companies decide where we should be focusing and where there may be some opportunities to improve. Freezing columns helps us in reports where there's a lot of data on the screen, and we want to keep our eyes on a specific column. Freezing columns in SAP works very similar to the freezing function in Excel. Let's take a look at VA05, our list of sales orders report. We'll leave our selection criteria empty and execute this report. We want a lot of columns on our report, so we'll select a different layout. We'll choose Select Layout, and we'll choose the Order Schedule layout. Our scroll bar has become active. That means that there's columns that are hidden on the right side of our screen. We want to look at our data as it relates to the sold to party, which are our customers. We'll left-click and hold on our sold to party column. We'll drag it to make it the leftmost column. Now we want to freeze this column. To do this, we'll right-click and choose Freeze to Column. Now on the right side of our sold to party column, we have a solid line showing that this is frozen. We're now able to scroll to the right, and we can see exactly which sales documents are associated with which sold to parties. To unfreeze our columns, we can go to Settings, Columns, Unfreeze Columns. You may have seen me do this in other videos, but there's one more trick that's really helpful to make our data easier to consume. It's the Optimize With function. To do this, we can right-click anywhere on our data output and choose Optimize With. Our report is now much more compact. In fact, we've got everything on one screen without a scroll bar. The Optimize With function in freezing columns can really help make report results easier to understand when you're working with large data sets. The drilling down function in reports transforms the data from being passive, where we're only taking in information, into active data that we're able to change. Let's take a look at VA05, our list of sales orders report. We'll execute this report without selection criteria. Let's look at order 19. It's a very big order for 8,000 pieces and $200,000 US. The drill down function is based on the primary component of the report. In our example, we're in the list of sales orders report. So our drill down is going to take us into the sales order instead of it taking us into information about the sold to party or the material. We can drill down by double-clicking anywhere in the row. Now, we can actually edit our sales order directly from this screen in the Change Standard Order transaction. To get back to our report results, we'll click Back. Now, there's one more trick if you want to drill down into some other master data that's referenced in a line item. To do this, click the checkbox next to the line item. We'll click Environment, Master Data. Now we could enter any of the master data fields that are included on this line item. We'll choose Material Master. We can see that we are now in the Material Master for the material from the sales order we selected. Drilling down is really useful when you're reporting and you want more specific information, or you need to actually change the data that is showing in your report results. Layouts in SAP define how report results are presented to us once reports are run. Creating and saving layouts can take a little bit of upfront work to make report results as useful as possible. Functionality in SAP allows us to save the layouts globally. This means that a layout you create can be used by your colleagues, and vice versa. Let's go into VA05 so we can create a global layout. We'll execute our list of sales orders report for all criteria. SAP lays out our report results in what it assumes is going to be useful for us. This is not always the case. Now we'll change our layout. We'll click the Change Layout icon. The layout is currently set to a standard one created for this report from SAP. We're going to start changing our layout to make it more useful for us. First, we'll add our sold to party name. This is going to be our customer's name. We'll click it and add it to our displayed columns. Next, we'll move it up next to sold to party. Next, we'll choose material description. We'll add it to our displayed columns and move that down below material. We also have the opportunity to total our columns. We'll do that now for net value. Next, we'll click our Sort Order tab. We want to show our newest orders first. So we'll select Document Date, add it to our sort criteria, and we'll sort in descending order to show our newest orders first. We could also add a filter or change our view. We'll now click Display. We want our report results to be as readable as possible, so we'll click the checkbox next to With Optimum Column Width. We'll now click Adopt. We can see our sold to party name and material description have been added to this report. We can also see that our document date has been sorted in descending order to show our newest orders first. We'll scroll down. We can also see that our net value column has been totaled. This is a much more workable layout for us, and we want to share it so our colleagues can use it. To do this, we'll save the layout. We'll name our layout /LIL. It's important to note that SAP requires the / to show that this layout is user-generated. In the name, we'll enter LinkedIn Learning. Because we're so happy with this layout, we want it to be defaulted every time we come into this report. We'll now choose Adopt. The system tells us our layout has been saved successfully. Now when we click Select Layout, we can now see that the new layout we created, LinkedIn Learning, has been created and is the default setting for this report. This is a global layout that anyone at our organization with access to this report can use. Taking the time to set up global layouts allows powerful visibility into the report data that matters most to your organization. They ensure everyone has the same important information and can collaborate on business decisions from an informed place. Where would creating a global layout be useful for you? Pause this video and go create a global layout that would help you and your team. When our reporting needs shift, certain layouts can become unnecessary. Let's look at deleting layouts that are no longer useful. We'll enter our list of sales orders reports using transaction code VA05. We'll run our report with open criteria. To delete a layout, we'll go to Settings, Layout, Administration. This brings us to our Layout Management screen. Now we'll choose our LinkedIn Learning layout to delete. We'll click Delete Layout. Now we have no layouts defined as our default. We'll click One SAP Orders Items and choose Define Default Setting. We've now defined a default standard layout, and we'll click Save. Our layouts have been saved. We've successfully deleted a layout and defined a new default. Business priorities change. Layouts that once provided value may no longer be worth keeping. Deleting layouts is straightforward when they're no longer useful to our organizations. Sharing report results can be really important at companies where not everyone has access to the system, or they may not know how to run the required report. Let's take a look at how to share report results. We'll enter the list of sales orders report using transaction code VA05. And we'll execute our report without adding any selection criteria. Now we want to share our report. The mail recipient function, which is reached by clicking the envelope icon, can work to directly email a recipient at your organization. One caveat is this functionality is not always set up. The other way to share the results is to export the report to Excel. To do this, go to List, Export, Spreadsheet. Now we want to choose the format we want to export this report in. I highly recommend using the XLSX version of Excel. Now we'll click Continue. Now we have to name our export. We'll enter VA05 report results. And click Save. We have successfully exported and saved this report in Excel. We can now attach this to an email. There's a few ways to share report results from SAP. The most consistent, and in my opinion, the easiest to work with, is saving as a spreadsheet and then sharing manually. Data is sometimes best viewed on a hard copy printout format. Let's look at printing reports in SAP. We'll enter transaction code VA05, our list of sales orders report. Now we'll execute this report. To print this report, we can simply go to our print icon and choose Print. Our output device should be defined with whatever the local printer that we want to print to is set as. Because we're digital, we want to print this to PDF, so we have PDF1 selected. And we want this to print immediately, so we'll leave the print time set. Now we'll choose Continue. Our printer is set to print to PDF, and we'll click OK. Because our file is digital, we have to give our file a name. We'll enter VA05 printout and click Save. Now we'll go to our desktop. We'll double-click, and we can see that our report has been successfully printed, in this case to PDF. The other option will be to export to Excel and print straight from there. That allows more flexibility for your output. Printing reports in SAP is flexible enough to give us the output we need in a format that's useful to us.